Sounds good. Do we have 4 B? Zoom. Like, where's my?
You were on the this. There you go. So they're all done. Yep, you're done. Yeah.
Okay. All right, ready?
Corbett, do yours.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. You can stay off mute. We're gonna do roll call in just a second, so heads up. Okay. And if anyone's listening in the back, make sure volume is down. It's, we have the Zoom is, the stream is playing.
Corbett, do your.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
You can stay off, we're gonna do roll call. There's one of those in the back.
Something, that's where I'm at.
You guys just want to play both of these.
The day before an election. Right. Someone's lost it.
Oh, really?
Oh, she's my neighbor. She's feisty.
Okay, we are live. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here tonight. We'll start the meeting by establishing quorum with roll call. John?
Here.
Christina? Here. Jen? Here. Joe?
Here.
Corby?
Here.
And I am here as well. We officially have quorum. John, has the meeting been properly noticed?
It has.
Thank you so much. Joe, could you go ahead and read our equity statement and our mission statement?
I'd be happy to. The VASD equity statement is: each student has access to the resources and educational rigor they need at the right moment in their education, regardless of race, gender, gender identity, ethnicity, ability, language, sexual orientation, religion, family background, or family income. And results policy, VASD mission statement reads: each student will acquire the knowledge and skills necessary to achieve their personal goals, thrive in global society, and lead a healthy, self-fulfilling life.
Thank you so much. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at the agenda for tonight? Are there any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion from John, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Joe, all in favor signify with aye. Aye. Tonight's agenda has been officially adopted. With that, we will move straight into the superintendent's report.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for, I think it would be an understatement to say a very full agenda that we have, but we appreciate the time and we have multiple actions from our Board of Education that are really important, not just here at the local level, but I think could possibly have a impact at the state level. So I appreciate the time and the commitment that you're making as a board, and we look forward to a productive night supporting our scholars, students, and families. Before we get started, I want to take an opportunity to thank our incoming principal for Verona Area High School, Mr. Brian Cox, for joining us here in person from Wyoming. Mr. Cox has been doing a wonderful job as transitioning as a new principal at the high school and is joining us once a month. It feels like a little bit more, like you probably getting a couple miles in yourself. But I think we appreciate the attention to detail, and we have already heard great feedback from our families, community, and more importantly, our students, what it means for you to be here and having those interactions. So thank you for joining us here tonight. This is a kind of bittersweet moment for our Board of Education as we want to formally and personally say thank you to Ms. Christina Navarro-Hefner. For her years of service as the Board of Education. I'm going to say a personal thank you and in having the trust in me when you were on the hiring committee to bring me in as superintendent for the Verona Area School District. And I want to keep a commitment that we will not let you down on that decision. So thank you for that and everything that you brought for so many years to our community. You're not moving away, and we know you will stay active. We want to say thank you. And I'll turn it over to our Board of Education as we present you with just some tokens of our appreciation as we continue to move forward.
Christina, I will say, our community, you are never one to toot your own horn. You never draw attention, you never, ever. I don't want to see myself in front. But this is the time where really our community deserves to know that you have been a tireless advocate for the students and the families of our district. This building has your fingerprints all over it. The TWE program has been something that you have lifted up so many times to continue to make sure that we are doing the best for all of our students and do it without ever expecting or even seeking personal recognition. It has always been selfless, truly embodied the selflessness of a board member. And it has been a pleasure and an honor to serve with you. I'm going to miss you terribly. But yes, you are not going far and you'll be hearing from us frequently. But you're hearing from me a lot.
I was reflecting on the fact that Meredith's the only other board member who was on the board when I started. I was like, wow, in 6 years, there's been plenty of change. 2 terms has been a lot of change.
Been through some
This
things.
wonderful building. Yes, we've been through some things. Boundary changes, like you mentioned, programs like we weren't even at high school level at that point. I was thinking back, I had a child in elementary, middle, and high school when I started. I now only have one in high school. This is a good thing because they writing something as a parent with 3 different grade bands can be a challenge. So, but I have 2 in college now, so a lot of change in 6 years, and I'm just really grateful. I mean, I don't really like doing my own work. I just feel so grateful that we have the privilege to serve. And the district's been so important to my own family as it is to the community. I know when I see my 2 college students, one of whom will be graduating this May, and the impact that K-12 education has on our students, it's just amazing to me. So I just feel it's an honor and privilege to serve. And this community is schools are so integral to this community, which is why I love living in Verona. And would never regret. I've lived here 16 years and I would absolutely go back and make the same choice again. So it's something that I love, that we all care so deeply about our schools. So it was an interesting time to serve. We had to stand with a big pandemic, but that happened. But yeah, it was just so much change and a lot of change in leadership, a lot of change at school levels too, but it's been really good.
Well, you have gone above and beyond as a board member, through long hours, built the high school through COVID. Our community has been so fortunate to have you in at the board table. So, and I've been so fortunate to call you a friend too. So thank you.
So I give you permission to have a little less change in the next. I always find it so fair that I have some kind of weird karma in my life, that when I seem to sign on to something, there's always some very unexpected things that happen. And she would look at me, she's like, "What are you again? Why is everything keep changing?" So now that I'm open, maybe it'll feel a little exciting. I don't know, growing as a kid so much. Here's my answer. Hope it appreciate it.
Did you humble us with opening it up for us and with a very pretty bow? I can guarantee you I did not tie that. So,
If it's the weight of it's making you wonder what the heck it is. Here. We did talk about.
Marsha, Marsha's
Okay, like I have kids here, everything, that's like my mother. My mother's Christmas tree is filled with presents, all that have both, that I could not engage in one of them. When I think I was anyone that time. I know, I love it.
And every time anyone looks out of the window of the library,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think of you, because that was a key design input.
Yes, well, I'm hoping if three spots will have me, I come volunteer, like I said, once I got off the board, I had time to do other things, right? Being in that library is volunteer, on my list, so. We'll see.
Well,
See if
I'm
I can-
happy to be you for everything that you have done, so. The bittersweet part of elections.
Yeah, but I am happy with it, someone's taking my spot, and I think will be a good addition to the board, and all will be good, right?
Yes, which is a great reminder that tomorrow we do have a big election, so we have got John on the ballot, we have Corby on the ballot, and we also have Juan Carlos Medina on the ballot, so fantastic that we have three uncontested seats that are up, so everyone definitely though, please get out and vote. It's a state election board for Verona and for Wisconsin, so.
Yes, and I say the community, yes, please keep participating. I know our community really participates, but I believe everyone on this board really has the best interest of the school district at heart, so. Always feel free to be in contact with us as board members and yeah, keep participating. Like I tell my kids, although they think I'm crazy, but what did you ever put? I ask them those questions and they kind of look at me and they're like, we've seen it online. I'm not sure we're up for it, but. They're young.
Give them time.
They're still in college, they have plenty of time.
Okay.
all right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you again and congratulations. Next, we're excited to celebrate our retirees for our hourly staff, which we have 4 that are on the screen or in front of you. We have Beverly A. Andrew, who's a cook at Stoner Prairie with 20 years of service. Deborah Lane, who is an educational assistant at Glacier Edge. Nancy Laycock, a cook over at Stoner Prairie, and Cheryl Ewers, the head cook at Glacier Edge Elementary. As you can see, we have 20, 23, 20, and 28 years of service respectively. So congratulations to our phenomenal hourly staff on their retirement, and we wish them well as they maybe get to sleep in a little bit more and enjoy life. So congratulations.
Fantastic, yes.
All right. Next, we have our finance and human resources update, and that'll be led by Mr. Weezy and Mr. Shelby. Thank you so much.
Shall start and then here as well, we do our finance portion. So as the board can see, and I've already caught 2 elbows in the ribs from Dr. Hawkins to be concise tonight. So I'm gonna do my best.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah, got it. We do have a lengthy agenda, but I do think we can keep everything concise. Rochelle and I are going to give an update on HR staffing and actually a benefits vote tonight. And that dovetails perfectly into a budget update. We're going to go through a rather lengthy state budget outlook and update. I'm going to be as quick as we can on this because board members have heard much of this, but a lot of this is for public consumption. This is the time the state is going back and forth to head into the summer and come out with the next 2-year budget. So a critical few months here at the Capitol. We want to make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of where things are. And we've got a related potential vote on a board resolution related to that budget. We're gonna go through our long range and some short range planning and kind of the levers we control as we look into this summer and start to finalize the budget. We'll send to the budget hearing, make sure the board's on the same page with what we've got over the next 5 months as far as our budget goes. We have a budget amendment, and that is just related to the Verona Ice donation. So hopefully that should go through a whole bunch of discussion. We're coming back to the board following our OE7 presentation here probably 6 weeks ago, when we had one of those indicators that the board encouraged us to touch up and bring back to them. We'll discuss that tonight with a vote. We have the date for the annual meeting set a little bit later, and we'll talk about that. And then we've got that state budget proposal or resolution. I'm going to actually have Rochelle walk through staffing and allocation and then benefits. So it's all you.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be up here to talk about OE4 and all the wonderful work that we're doing for our employees here through the district. Thought it would be nice to ground ourselves briefly on what we would consider our staffing and allocation life cycle. So what you can see up on the screen and in front of you is where we start and how we work through the school year in supporting how we staff our buildings. That starts at step 1, where our principals and SBLT are working with their teams to understand their theory of action and how it relates to their continuous improvement plan. And that helps them drive step 2, which our principals went through in December and January, on determining what their student needs are and what their staffing needs are. They then worked with their directors and came forward and proposed what they need or wish to have for their staffing allocation for this upcoming school year. And that was all done in the last week in February. And it was all of the directors that you see sitting here and more that sat through all of those presentations, really understand the good work that's happening in our buildings, to celebrate the successes that our principals had gone through and to support them and understand what needs they need going forward. We then took all of those recommendations and presented them to Dr. Clardy, Chad, and Dr. Hawkins on what we would consider those staffing investments that we would put forward for next school year. And then we finalized that staffing plan right now with our mass posting and looking at how we make sure all of those wheels work behind the scenes to make sure next year starts off with a smooth pitch. So to ground ourselves back in kind of what our goals are for staffing commitments, for our employee handbook for elementary schools, we have class sizes of 15 to 25 for elementary and 15 to 30%. That helps us understand where we need to invest in FTE specifically for class related pieces. But on top of that, that is just a projection at this point. So we also commit to looking at our enrollment, whether it be in charter, TWE, or our buildings. And we continue to look at it now, and over the summer becomes something that we look at on a weekly basis. And we start looking at what our FTE is per building and then per grade level. And if we are seeing student enrollments increasing or decreasing, sometimes we have to make shifts for where we are appointing employees, sometimes even towards the end of August, if we see a bubble happening in one of our buildings. The other big piece that I just want to thank our community and the board for is the referendum that we passed in November. That referendum has been key to the FTE and other commitments that we've been able to make for this upcoming school year, whether that's our class sizes and also looking at what it's going to look like this summer. For our referendum FTE, we committed to 5 really important pieces that we have expressed with our employees and our principals in our community, and how we are applying FTE allocation for this upcoming school year. That is staff collaboration, retaining and attracting highly qualified staff, focusing on our staff-to-student ratios, multilingual programming, and rich and specialized services. And I just want to focus us on those 5 pieces right now as we work through what it looks like this upcoming year for our staff. So again, I shared, our principals shared their staffing allocation with the directors and school leadership in February. What was so beautiful as a part of this process was the thinking outside of the box that our principals went through and the advocacy that they have for their students in their building and doing what's right. Throughout that presentation, we had over 60 teacher equivalent FTEs presented to us for ads for this upcoming school year. 60. With that, Dr. Clarity, Dr. Hawkinson, Chad, spent some time narrowing those 60 down, focusing on those 5 pieces of the referendum to identify what commitments we are able to roll out for this upcoming school year. And we are excited and pleased to say out of that 60, we have over 30 FTE that we are adding next school year to tie back to those wonderful commitments. And again, I want to celebrate the successes and say thank you to our community for that. This is a huge, huge investment for students. With that, I want to dive a little deeper into those. Some of those FTE were actually added second semester this school year. So we added multilingual programming support and support to support our students. The bigger add though is for this upcoming school year. And I just want to call out a couple of really important pieces here. One is that staff collaboration. Here at the high school, we have been listening to teachers for many, many years about having a different master schedule. And with the referendum, we are actually able to provide more staff collaboration with that. That is a huge win for us and for our staff. It also means that we are going to focus on the FTE that they are bringing in. We are prioritizing bilingual skills in all of those items. So we are asking and saying our bilingual candidates get this. We also are committing on top of that to multilingual programming and Badger is going to see more multilingual teachers to support tweet houses and all of their programs, which is a huge win as well and really important needs across the district. On top of that, you can see there are some big commitments to staff to student ratios, rich programs and specialized services, and hourly staff. I don't want to forget about our hourly staff in this process as well. We are also adding FTE for our hourly staff because we know they also have such significant students in our student programs. Next steps for us, you can see up here, next step was a mega posting on March 17th. That is when we put all of those positions out on VCAN and we start actively recruiting for this upcoming school. So we are in the midst of our recruiting season right now. There was that March 17 mega posting. We had another one this past Friday as well. Our principals have been updated and we continue to remind them about our hiring practices and what our commitments are. Human resources and our directors have been critical in supporting that work. And we will make sure that next year when we start the school year, we've got all of these positions filled so that we are doing what's right in our buildings. We are also going to continue to monitor class sizes. So like I mentioned before, right now is an educated guess on what it's going to look like. But of course, that's going to change. So our commitment is between now and honestly, through the end of September, we're going to watch those class sizes and make adjustments as we need to along the way. And I also just want to call out in the space, those 60 requests and the 30 that we paused on for this upcoming school year are still going to be things that we're going to be reviewing for the coming school years. If you recall, our referendum is reoccurring, or it continues over multiple years. And so while the commitments this year are focusing on those 5 priority areas, we will continue to have conversations with our principals and our leaders and our staff and our community to understand what additional needs we need to make the following school year and the school year.
Rochelle, do we want to pause briefly to see if there's any questions on staff?
I'll ask you a quick one. So where it says, when it describes the 2023-24 staffing adjustments for year and job title location. Under Rowan High School, classroom teachers 6.2. So does that include you said you were prioritizing, bilingual staff, but would that be inclusive of, like, let's say, a key teacher that needs to be added because the freshman class goes up to sophomores and they need a chemistry teacher, bilingual chemistry teacher, is that included in the 6.2?
It's a great question. So that is a perfect example of what is happening at this point, and that will be allocated through nutrition. So these 6.2 are in addition to that. So we know infotech is an area that we are committing to, so there is an additional 1.0 FTE in here for infotech or math. So it's on top of those additions.
Oh, okay.
There are, and we don't have to get deep in the weeds tonight, but there are, there's been like 0.4 teachers worth of music that students have registered for the last 4, 5, 6 years, and we haven't been able to run because of staffing been so tight. And this year, we're able to run those additional sections of music, pick up an additional music teacher for this building that will eventually actually fill out a full-time job. And Rochelle didn't get too far into detail on this, but really 2 things happened with the addition of a high school allocation. We were able to offer courses in the past that just had to get taught. And that was the biggest one. And the second piece is we were able to, with the work done to the master schedule, prioritize doing everything we can to get a common prep every day, every other day in the block schedule, with teachers that are teaching the like content subjects, which has not happened in the history of this building. So kind of 2 big wins related to the master schedule.
But that's what you said, like the 0.4 music. So before there were students that wanted to take music, and we had to basically cap it and say, okay, we're only going to offer this many sections for this music, that music. So certain students weren't able to take it.
Correct, yeah, and that will happen in perpetuity here, that there will always be some classes that 7 students register for, and we're just like,
Yeah.
we'll try, we'll recruit a little harder next year, hopefully we can get it up to 17 to run it. But the added allocation will help kind of pick up some of the things that have been cut that were a solid class or 2, that Pam and the team just had to make tough decisions around because there was only so many teachers to fill spots for the other sections.
I have a quick question. Might be too early to say, because it sounds like the posting only went up maybe 2 weeks ago, but how has interest compared to previous year?
It has been a slower start, but I would call out that many of these positions are really specialized positions. So it is hard when we say it's specialized. On the flip end, I can say that some of our, we're hiring for an associate principal. We have over 40+ applicants for an AD position. So it really depends. I have been shocked and surprised in some of the interest in those positions. And I think it's just a matter of time as we see students graduating and staff now starting to look from other districts.
We've got openings in hard to fill spots like technology education, family consumer science, music. Those are all typically, if you get 4 or 5 high quality applicants to interview, you get a home run. So yeah, some of those are tough to fill.
Do you feel you have to, because you said you're prioritizing bilingual staff as well, do you feel you have to cast a wider net then to find, like I just referenced the chemistry teacher we need for like sophomore training. Is that something where you have to reach out in ways you haven't had to in the past? Or think about that?
Absolutely. We are trying all sorts of different ways this year to recruit. So our normal post on Weekend does not do justice at this. So we are posting on Indeed, LinkedIn, K-12 education, our schools. We have cast the net nationally. Handshake is a new one that we are utilizing as well. So we are doing that. Plus also, I think it's just word of mouth. That is sometimes the best way we hire positions. So I want to call out our leaders and our principals for pounding the pavement to get their postings out as well, because they help gather those.
All right, recognizing we've got a long night ahead of us, as long as you guys are okay, we'll keep going.
All right, so let's catch you up to speed a little bit on insurance. And again, this ties us back to OE4. I just want to ground ourselves briefly in the employee insurances that we've got through the school district. We have health insurance through group health cooperative. We have an HMO and a point of service plan. Dental insurance is through Delta Dental Wisconsin. Vision is also through Delta Dental Wisconsin. And we've got some financial protection, life insurance, disability, long-term care, and flexible spending. These are our standard benefit packages that are offered to non-members. I want to take it one step deeper and just break out what it looks like here through the school district. If you recall, we have around 900 employees, and you see within GHC, almost half of them are enrolled in our HMO family insurance. We have almost 200 enrolled in the single plan. The point of service plan is available. We're going to continue to see that plan kind of become smaller and smaller in enrollments because GHC is widening their network. So the more doctors GHC has, the less people will enroll in that point of service plan because there's more offering. Dental insurance has around 400 employees. Life and disability, we cover all of our employees. Our premium, if you see on the far right column, is really important. This is the work that we do behind the scenes with our carriers to negotiate our renewals. GHC had us locked in at a 6.9 renewal cap this year. That's what we originally built the budget off of. We have spent the last few months negotiating with GHC, and they were able to lower their rate to 4.9, which is a huge win. That helps us in many of the other ways, helps us with that financial cliff that is going to come sooner rather than later and preserve some finances for others. Our HMO plan is a really rich plan through the school district. They have a simple $20 copay, and employees pay $20 when they go see them. If they need to have inpatient hospital stays or outpatient surgery, they have a $100 deductible for single or $300 for family, and our prescriptions are amazing. People pay nothing for each in your house. $0 and $5 for 20 days. That is the investment that I just want to thank you for making to ensure that folks don't have to worry about healthcare. They get to focus on being educators, teachers, and at the end of the day, if they have a need, they can rely on our insurance plan to cover those. Historically, we have been with GHC for many, many years. We signed a 5-year contract with them in 2016-17. The last 3 years were 1-year contracts, and then this past year we signed a 3-year contract with them again, which helps us with that rate lock guarantee and gives us the ability to budget a little better, and then allows us to really plan strategically what it's going to look like when we renew with GHC. This is a really interesting page that I think if we're going to briefly go over, and it's what I call our speedometer check with GHC. And the easiest way to explain this is for every dollar that GHC collects in premiums, they want to spend a certain amount on medical claims and a certain amount on administrative fees. And GHC is saying for every dollar they collect in premiums, they want to spend 90 cents on claims and 10 cents on administrative fees. And that means at that point that if you get to that 90-10 ratio, that your renewal rate is going to be locked in at what they would consider just average trend. If you are running better than that, you should go below trend. If you're running higher than that, you're probably going to have a higher renewal rate. You can see on our medical loss ratio, that big graph, that we are running at 93%. So for every dollar they collect in premiums, they're paying up 93 cents in claims. So we're running a little high, but not significant. The other thing that's really exciting for me is our pharmacy claims. We are running really, really good for pharmacy claims. We're well in the green. It is something that we need to watch going forward. But because of this and how well our employees are taking care of their health and our wellness program, where we ask employees to go to the doctor once a year, and just GHC engagement, we have really healthy employees that is helping us maintain a really good insurance plan. I want to just wrap up briefly and tie us back to OE4, and part of OE4 is that we remain competitive within the market. And I just want to call out, in comparison to other districts, we have one of the richest benefit plans here in Dane County. Our employee premium contribution is 11%. The average is 10%, and I just want to call it out. Madison throws us off. Most of the other districts in the area, employees are paying 10 to 12%. So we're right in alignment. Our office visit copay is right in alignment. Our prescription drugs are significantly better than what we are seeing in the area. Many of our districts are moving to high deductible health plans. You can see on here, Stoughton has a high deductible health plan. Some of our other districts are actually rolling out high deductible health plans this upcoming year as well, which means that their benefit plans are going to be less rich than what we are offering because we will have to pay for something upfront. And the best part about this is the insurance premium increases. You can see that in the Dane County area, average increases are higher than what we were able to negotiate. And that again just shows the relationship we have with GHC and the help that we have. This is a celebratory slide. I think it just shows the hard work that we do and that ensures that we are remaining competitive when we look at total rewards for our employees.
Just for clarification, Michelle, for our board, that the comparison that you just described, other districts are not using GHC. These are their insurance plans overall, not necessarily GHC's.
Yes. There are some districts that have GHC, the majority of districts use ports or D. With that, I want to open it up for questions and then just remind you that later on tonight, we need the board approval to move forward with.
So now would be time to ask any questions that you need so that you're fully informed for the vote later.
So I just have a clarifying question. So it looks like our vote is going to be to approve the contract for GHC for next year, but I'm seeing that we have this 3-year contract also in the background. So there's still this ongoing kind of revisit each year, even though we have this 3-year sort of block commitment. Am I interpreting that correct? So we've got this 3-year sort of plan, but we are just agreeing that the 4.9 next year, that's our scope.
GHC said we will lock into these rates for the next 3 years, but they did not require us to lock in. And so we still have the opportunity to say, yes, we want to lock in for this upcoming year, or no, we do not.
Thank you. That actually a lot of things.
On that speedometer slide that you had, how did that, because I think I remember seeing that last year, but I can't remember where we came in last year. You recall off after that, how that compared to previous years?
Yeah, I do. Our medical loss ratio is slightly higher this year than last year. You can see on the speedometer, there's a prior. So you look right below the speedometer, you'll see recent and then
There it is, yeah.
So you can see we are trending upward just slightly this next year for both pieces. We can go into greater detail on what it is. It's not shocking at this point just because of inflationary costs. Medical costs are much higher this year than last.
Any additional questions?
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
As we transition here, we'll bring Pete up and up for the few technical questions related to the budget. Pete's certainly here and available. Again, we've got a few things we're going to cover tonight and a number of board bullets. We'll make sure that we're prepped for and get to the school board action portion of the agenda. We did want to get into a state budget outlook and update. I went to a meeting 3-4 weeks ago in Sun Prairie, a Dane County summit related to the state budget. And Ann Chapman, who is a policy analyst for the Wisconsin Association of School Business Officials, WASBO, and that's a new position for that state organization, came and gave probably an 80-slide update on the state budget. She sent that out to all the superintendents and business directors afterward, encouraged us to glean what we wanted and share this with our board and our community, and we've done so. So I just kind of cherry picked the very top slides related to what's going on in the state budget, but wanted to give Anne credit for the work she did to make sure we were informed. I did through these, and again, some of this will be reviewed for the board. I'm going to do this in relatively quick fashion. Please stop me along the way if you have any questions. So as a reminder, the entire state of Wisconsin sits in a similar position. A little more than a third of the districts have passed a referendum to wiggle their way out of this position. I think another 85 school districts have operating questions on the spring ballot related to kind of the chaos related to our state budget and inflation kind of paired together. So as a reminder, the last 2-year budget, we wedged in ESSER funds as kind of a stopgap at the state level. And then inflation got cooking and we find ourselves in a spot that we're lagging way behind when it comes to inflation and just state spending related to the rest of the nation. So you will hear lawmakers at the state level bouncing this back and forth in terms of what they're going to do related to the revenue cap freeze and what happened with kind of the pandemic aid running out and the fiscal cliff that will happen. We don't have a fiscal cliff coming because we passed our own state budget in a way at the local level. But all of what's happening to fund our schools with that $19 million happens at the local level. Just because we passed a referendum had nothing to do with what we get for the state assisting us to fund our schools. In fact, it kind of does the opposite. As we spend more per pupil compared to our peers, the state actually funds us less on a ratio. So we are watching some numbers at the next 2-year state budget very closely. This is kind of supermarket fodder, and Pete and I think, came up with a slightly more aggressive version of this. But again, if we went just back to 2008 and took our per pupil revenue limit and inflated it with inflation, we would have another $3,200 per pupil to spend on any given year. And that would be a combination of what we get in state aid and what we have to tax. $3,200 in a very short period of time.
What's the math and what that for $17? You know what this. Yeah, I know. Many millions.
I think it's $15 million, but you can punch it in. So where would we be at in terms of school districts just with inflation? These are, again, just some high level talking points, but I thought the top one was really interesting. That if the state had increased our per pupil revenue amount from 21-22 to 24-25, in line with inflation, we get another $1,500. That's just in that super short window. And one of the things that you're hearing at the state level, at least on the Democratic side, is a push to come up with some way to gut this broken system that on an annual basis, our lawmakers agree, at the very least, they will do what they can or flat out do an inflationary increase related to funding public schools. And some states, even Minnesota, are passing this into law that, and they might put a cap on it. Whatever inflation is up to 4%, the state of Minnesota is agreeing to fund schools at that rate. And then it's not a mystery. Then we're not up here with kind of Ouija boards and referendum talk to try to fund schools on an annual basis. This is interesting. We've gone from the 11th funded school district in the nation to the 25th in a rather short period of time, a couple of decades. And this is interesting as well. What's happened over the last 2 decades for us to drop in terms of school funding has actually resulted in us paying the lowest amount of tax on record as residents of the state of Wisconsin. And Waswell broke this into kind of an interesting chart. So our tax burden, simply, and I believe this is a simple equation of how much do you make, how much you tax divided by how much you make. And that's gone from 2.4% in 1985, and it's historically low, 1.64% of what people make on average they pay in taxes. And that's kind of been done on the backs of public schools. This is just a reminder how fortunate we are to be in this school district where we did have our taxpayers and our citizens vote to pass a referendum. We're also in a district with increasing enrollment. So Rochelle mentioned the number of employees we have the luxury to add. That's a combination of us picking up students We average about 7 students per adult in this district. And we'll be 125, 150 students more than we were a couple of years ago. And are picking up staff members in line with that. But 3/4 of the state of Wisconsin has declining enrollment in school districts. And they are faced with a state budget right now. No new recurring funds related to the pandemic relief and ESSER funds, and fewer kids. And with us having a past referendum and increased enrollment, we're in a better spot than most school districts and need to continue to kind of remind ourselves how fortunate we were about it. This is just a slide on the rise in school referendum that it had gone through over the last couple of decades. You can see the trend line is significantly higher, historic, signaling to our lawmakers something has to happen. Or maybe that's what they want at the state level. Turn public education into an isolated, isolated local issue, and start to drift away from the idea of free and appropriate public education in the state, because there will be haves and have-nots if things don't change at the state level or either. This is an important slide and will be very applicable to what the board will vote on in terms of a resolution. And Dr. Clarity now will go through that resolution here in a little bit. But the board should know that these were high-level things that were built into Governor Evers' state budget proposal. So $1,000 increase in revenue limit over the next couple of years, an increase in pupil aid. That's a big number we're watching. That low revenue ceiling does not apply to us, but some school districts kind of got caught when they went to revenue limits and are finding themselves in even a worse spot than us. The big one we're going to be watching is special ed reimbursement. So as a reminder to the school board, on an annual basis, the state of Wisconsin reimburses our costs of required education services related to special ed at 31.7%. Everything that is not reimbursed from the state, we take out of Fund 10 in the form of a transfer. And those are big dollars. I think Pete started to mess around with even a 4, 5, 6%, and all of a sudden it's 6 figures in a hurry that we would not have to pass on to taxpayers that would be funded from the state of Wisconsin. So to take that from 31 to 60 equates to millions of dollars for our school district. So that is a big number for us to watch in the state budget. This is a reminder of the timeline. We are at the end of it. So March and April, all the way to June, Joint Finance Committee, public hearings, and this getting bounced around back and forth with our lawmakers. We are expecting a budget late June or early July for the next 2 years. And then I'll pass this off to Dr. Clarity, but I think Dr. Clarity wanted to mention the superintendent letter related to this resolution, and then we can go a little more local in terms of what's happening with our budget.
Absolutely. Thank you, board. So any action, we would actually wait until the board action part of the agenda, but I just want to front load the conversation. And I want to begin with saying, as we think about the voices of our community, and we did a masterful job of reaching voices of our community, especially during the referendum session. And if you think about each session that many of you were there multiple times or heard either through email presentation or directly from our constituents, was yes, we value and appreciate and want to support public schools, but we need our administration and board to push the Capitol and push our legislation into making the appropriate decisions. And you think about minimum investment is sustainable funding that is the least in line with inflation. And so when I provided a possible resolution for the board to discuss and take into consideration today, I don't do that very lightly, because I'm asking you to really stamp and take a stance on addressing state funding issue that seems to, we see historically by off the charts what has happened, and we know at this current state that we will continue to put a significant burden on our community unless something changes on our funding system. So the ask, and I feel like they're I almost feel they're minimum, but they're a start. And thinking of just the revenue limits to at least $1,000, and you saw what the real numbers are. We at least 1,000 over 2 years for the biennial budget. And the mandated service that our students with disabilities increase are reversed at, and Chad said this, but I really want to emphasize that. Our students with IEPs deserve these supports. They deserve these supports. And we want to provide those, and we want to provide those adequately, and money should never be an issue why there's even a discussion. You know, so we're asking for the state to at least reimburse by 60% to close that financial gap that comes out of fund 10. And then we think about our services and the diverse needs of our district. We all know mental health, nutrition, and those and bilingual sports, those services again that our students deserve, and wanting that to our state to really think about a way to help appropriately acknowledge that these issues and needs exist and support that with appropriate resources and funding that, quite frankly, we have the funding. And just thinking, and now it's just a means of taking that next step to allow that to come to fruition. So while I won't ask the board to vote on a resolution or consider a resolution just yet, I just wanted to kind of personally put my stance on it, and also, as you were all with us together, really reinforce the voices of our community who asked for us to take that stance at the legislative level.
So with that, we did have a slide for questions. Joe, quick follow up to your question. My math was 3,000 a kid by our 5,000 students. We have 5,800-ish students. If you plug in the exact number, it's $19 million.
That's just if we had stayed coupled to inflation.
Instead.
And again, same, even with inflation, I was just breaking even.
Right. And then we'll open this up for questions, but to double down on what Dr. Clardy said is just kind of one layer removed in terms of my perspective. A really solid state budget means that we're not on the referendum show again for 5%. It consumed our school district for a year, and we aren't necessarily in the business. We didn't get in the business of doing the referendum vote show. We're about making sure that classroom experience is the best it can be in the school district. So a rock solid state budget means that the $19 million that our taxpayers passed on lasts longer, and we can adequately fund this. So that's why we're all in on it this time. That's the big deal. So we'll take any other questions and do a really quick update on our current budget.
I just have a quick comment that I think it is really important that this gets services for public consumption, as you said. You know, I think we've kind of lived in this dialogue, and we, I think as the public service folks that we are, know a bit about some of these things and keep up with the information, but this teeter-totter, I feel, right, that as a taxpayer in a community, how do I understand how that teeter-totter affects me and my tax bill of paying taxes to the state and how the state decides to spend that money versus my local school district having to come and ask directly, and then how to keep informing the community how that balance plays out, and then the decisions of the state in turn directly connect to what your school district needs and has to ask for. So I just think lifting this up, and that to say, I think that speaking to the resolution is very huge, that we are here to serve the public as fiscally responsible representatives of the community, and something like this resolution, I think, puts that to practice, that we are protecting and standing up for the rights of all of our taxpayers with the voice and position we have.
I think the WASB, or sorry, the WASBO officially said put that slideshow together, say anything about, because I've read and seen some discussion about tying these requests on revenue limit increases and state aid increases to expansion of the voucher program. Was there any more discussion about that?
There was, yeah, they went deep into that. We did not, that wasn't, you know, like I said, there were 80 slides. The Wisconsin Association of School Business Officials represents public schools in Wisconsin. And they went through the implications of vouchers. And I think what a lot of taxpayers, regardless of right or left, don't realize is that vouchers are funded at the state level. Which means even if you are in an area that does not have a voucher school, if vouchers are happening and they're expanded, a cut of all of the state money used to fund education gets siphoned off for voucher schools, regardless of if it's actually benefiting your community. So that those two things have been tethered to each other at the state level and would have an impact on the budget statewide.
And correct me if I'm wrong about that, we did have more students in our district that would be in an expanded voucher program. That those costs get passed along to our local taxpayers. And because what I found in discussing this issue with people is there's not a lot of understanding of that their property taxes go up to pay for kids in this community that are going to voucher school.
I think it's also important to call out, a large state surplus. I think sometimes people don't realize it, they think, oh, we love to give more to schools, but what does that mean we have to do? And I think it's important to remember that the state has a surplus right now. It's not like they have to go increase your sales tax or do something else, right? They have a surplus. So it's important to remember that all of us have paid sales tax and other forms of state tax that is being held and it is there available. We're just asking that they please properly fund schools with the money that's already been taken from taxpayers. That's the part that I think we have to remind people, because it's not as though we're asking them to, again, like I said, raise the sales tax or do something that would have impact. We've already given the state the money that their schools, local schools need, and they haven't.
It's frustrating. And as I showed you before, the tax burden has gone down for 2 decades. At the cost of public schools.
So as someone who's editorialized on this in the past, after infinitum, I will follow up on Student Jennifer's comments that it is not a coincidence that the number that Joe asked you for is $19 million, which was a random number. Like the surplus kind of matches the holdback of inflationary adjustments to schools. Not a coincidence. This isn't like a political discussion. This is math. And I had a very long and complicated conversation with someone about this weekend. That's just right there in front of me.
Can I ask a historical question too? Because when you see that special ed number, it's hard to believe that we only get 30% back. But is there a point in the past where that number was closer to 60, or is that so far in the past then?
No, I've never seen it anywhere close to that.
Okay.
It's always been in the between 25 to 30 range, at least for the last decade and a half.
So it's been less than half of what the target would be for 36.
My understanding is that logically it should reflect the difference in cost between student reimbursements and the special needs that a student might have. And the fact of the matter is that those costs have gone up dramatically over the last decade or so, especially recently with inflation. So I would imagine that there isn't a 60% historically precedent, but the fact is that that's how much it costs now, is that much more. So.
Okay. Thank you for that. And again, board resolution on the way and board action a little bit later. We're going to do a quick budget update, but reminder to the board, we're just kind of chugging along here until we get ourselves to September and have passed a budget that we sent to or August to send a budget to the budget hearing in September. And this is very closely connected to what we just talked through. So a reminder to the board, things that we don't control. We like to think we're going to have a little control tonight when we pass a board resolution, ends up on the front of the Verona Press, catches some traction at the state level, people listen to us. But things we don't control, we don't really control the next state budget. That will be handed to us. But the big 3 things we are watching in the state budget are per pupil permission, the state categorical aid, and what happens with special ed reimbursement. We don't control cost of living. That is still above 5%. We're working our way to halfway through this year now. This year that we'll have January set that again, and we don't control property value locally. But those are all things that impact our budget greatly. Things we do control, the staffing we carry, what we end up doing in terms of compensation, and we had an in-depth discussion with the board on debt management at last week. things we can manage. This just came from Rochelle. Cost of benefits, operational costs to a certain extent. Are we bringing a contract for transportation here within the next month? That's an example, and how we utilize one-time funds. And again, this is a graphic we'll probably all see a few more times before we get ourselves to September. It's finding that appropriate balancing act between what we're comfortable with on the right side, taxes and mill rate related to all of our ongoing expenses. Did have an update for the board, and this is just a quick status update in terms of the work Pete and I are doing to track the budget. And some of this doesn't matter until we actually get ourselves to a spot that the budget passes in July. But it's important we work on some assumptions to make sure that we're in a conservative, good spot this time of year. And I wanted the board to know again, historically what happened with the budget, that's over on the left-hand side, but DPI put into their proposed budget, what the governor put in his budget, and what Pete, Chad, and the finance crew, what we have currently working on the 5-year model related to our best guess for the state budget. So for the time being, and we'll see if things change at the state level in terms of the buzz that's happening. We have $200 a year, and I hope that is on the conservative side, but you never know. 2 zeros happened last time a budget passed. A slight increase to what's happening with special ed reimbursement and the total aid pot increasing. This would be an increase in state aid that would be available to spread across the entire state in terms of what we're tracking in terms of our budget assumptions over the next 2 years. And that will change likely one more time before we get ourselves to July. And then we will know 90% of what we need to know once we get to July 10th, July 15th, and the states pass that next 2-year budget. I want to remind the board that we have not settled a contract for next year, and just keep in mind one of the things that we do control is staff compensation in our budget. And this is just a graphic to show what staffing costs as we make increases related to CPI. The board has seen that before. And this is a new slide. This is one of Pete's many spreadsheets we took a screenshot of, but wanted to know, have the board just know what we're starting to build into next year's budget. A few more of these are starting to become real numbers. We know we're adding a total of 24 FTE. The reason that's 24 and not 30 is we use a teacher FTE as what we account for as an FTE. We added some hourly staff that equate to, kind of a teacher and a half or 2 teachers when it comes to total compensation package. And it turns into 24 FTE at $80,000 a year. And for the time being, we have a placeholder out there for 4.5% related to CPI. I just want the board to see the all-in cost of people, a CPI adjustment, step adjustment, and then compression adjustment for next year's budget. That's $5.6 million. We get nothing from the state. The only way we fund that is pulling $5.5 million out of the $19 million we had on the operating front. And we are certainly hopeful something more will come from the state, but that's not the case. But if those things hold true, and even those $200 hold true, you can see we're on the bottom there, but we're starting to wean ourselves off the ability to use some of that extra funding authority for extra debt management on the bottom.
Just real quick, Chad, the CPI projection you have in here for next year, 4.5. Am I remembering wrong, or is that considerably lower than what we used to think it was tracking?
That is how much it would actually cost us.
Oh.
Yeah, so we're still looking at 8% as CPI that VAE and VESPA can collectively bargain towards. But then we also put in the cost of a step and the cost of compression. And this was just to show the board, just for conversation's sake, what that would look like. And they aren't real numbers until we've settled. A quick 5-month look ahead. I'll just pull out a few things that we're tracking. So you all had a budget update today. I think we have collective bargaining scheduled to get started towards the end of the month, April. May, we're gonna monitor the state budget and update the board as needed. June, we'll start to have some more detailed preliminary budget recommendations. And collective bargaining will likely continue. We are tracking towards, and I mentioned the board this before, this will have a budget impact. An update on coaching, kind of coach to student athlete ratios, and coaching compensation, which has not been touched in this district in a decade. So Joel and I and Rochelle are working behind the scenes for an update, likely sometime in June for the board related to coaching. July, we wait for the budget. We hear from the state aid, have another budget update to the board. And then August, we will have a preliminary budget that we will send to that budget hearing in September. Questions on our budget at all? And I just have a few more slides, if not. Thank you for that. I don't think there's gonna be a ton of questions on this, but this is the budget transfer we told you would be coming when we approve the donation to Vermont Ice. That's just when you move funds from one fund to another, state law and board policy requires the board to approve that. So that will be that's what we'll be voting on, moving $250,000 from one fund line to another. And I think that is it was good for me and Pete. Pete used to stay up there. He'd like questions on that at all? All right, this will be another board vote on the way, and I think this falls in line with the discussion we had. We did and Pete was actually a big help with this. So as a reminder to the board, 743 had this statement in it. The district will maintain an inventory of physical assets to safeguard against theft and losses, and we define assets and fixed assets to mean property or equipment that's over $5,000. Remember that discussion? I used the data projector as an example. And we recommended that we actually change the language to track the following. That we will track all purchases of physical assets exceeding $5,000. That is happening already. Pete and I went back with the accounting team. We are assigning a number and detailed tracking every purchase that comes in for a physical asset of over $5,000 in our accounting system. And we'll maintain an accurate inventory of anything in our district that has a likelihood of theft or ongoing maintenance needs, and we'll give that to the board in terms of flat out evidence with tracking systems related to technology, our OE12, anything related to our facilities that has high maintenance needs, actually things in library media and so forth. And that is our recommended change. So we're not actually tracking on the front end. We know we bought that data projector. We know it has, we know we purchased it and it has an actual tag number on it when it comes to the district, but we will not maintain a perfect accurate inventory of that because it's not, well, it's not good use of our time to do so. So that's our recommended changes that we would have board action come with the table. Seeing lots of head nods, so I think we're in a good spot there. Board action, number 5 in our bucket tonight. We're asking the board to approve our annual meeting on September 25th. This year, this is later than we've done in the past. Some school districts wait all the way until October. We're recommending waiting a little bit longer so we have more information. We will have the state budget. We'll have aid estimates on the books, and we will have, at the very least, Pete Craig and Company will have our first run at what's going on with student enrollment. So we will have the most exact information to share at the annual meeting and budget hearing. When we did it before in early August, some of those things were yet to kind of come to fruition. So that's a recommended date for the annual meeting, and we will have a vote on that. I think that's actually it. Questions at all? Okay. Thanks, everybody. I think we've got that for Hawkins.
Thank you, Judge.
The way.
Or transition, stand up and stretch your legs.
You're gonna say that.
Just for your own health.
Yeah.
Stretch your legs real quick, so.
Keep doing.
No, come on.
Every 20 minutes, for the 20 feet away. Yes. Of course, he stood up too. So good evening. Tonight, we're going to talk to you all about results policies, like your social studies. And just to refresh and review your memory, the VASD Board of Education values student learning and achievement that meets or exceeds grade level standards, as well as goal setting as a cornerstone of teaching and learning. And so that is one of the foundational tenets as we're talking about social studies tonight. Tonight, you're going to hear from myself, along with Karen Stocks-Glover and our Director of Elementary, Adam Zingshine, as we will talk about capacity building as it relates to social studies indicator, as well as the other indicators where we're speaking specifically about the instructional minutes and what's happening in our classroom. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen Stocks-Glover. And she'll talk more specifically about the work we've done in capacity building. She'll make some connections to the curriculum audit that she shared with you all. And we had our CLSs share with you all, so she'll make some connections to that learning as to how that is going to help further our work in social studies.
I just want to point the board briefly to the key leadership findings and the results policy, which focuses on that district-wide focus on disciplinary literacy, a focus on developing those structures for staff collaboration. I'm looking to implement that curriculum audit process that included social studies, participating in leadership development of the Unbounded Standards Institute, which allowed us to lean specifically into those standards for literacy specifically, implementing those school-based leadership teams, the creation of a new organizational structure, implementation of our continuous improvement plan, and the repurposing of a position for teaching, learning, and innovation curriculum resources. Also wanting to call the current state that we have identified our standards at most of the grade levels for social studies in looking at the curriculum audit. However, the assessments are not always clearly aligned to the standards. And often we find that teachers, as the second bullet points out to us, are creating or finding instructional resources when they are not available in the curriculum resources, especially for differentiation. And here again, we're calling out the need for resources that are designed to address the needs of our students with IEPs and also multi-age learners. And that lack of aligned resources specifically for them. So our desired state is clearly to have a K-12 standards aligned curriculum resources for social studies. To be sure that we have done the curriculum mapping for coherence and vertical alignment, skills progression in those standards. To be sure that we provide the professional development and certainly the support for PLCs with the implementation of those standards aligned instruction and assessments, knowing that that is a priority work for us as well. And then those aligned resources again for multilingual learners and students with IEPs and for instruction and interventions.
I will go to slide 61. And so as we speak specifically of capacity building, we will know that we made reasonable progress when the adoption of our social studies curriculum will ultimately lead to high quality standards aligned social studies instruction. That includes a curriculum scope and sequence and metrics
to measure student performance in the 23-24 school year. So that is the work that we will begin to do next year. One of the things that I'll point out, you know, the need for curriculum helps us to avoid teachers using teacher created materials that are often vetted and based on the standards. So those are things that will allow us to do.
So again, taking this to the indicators, and indicator 1, building capacity in the Wisconsin standards for social studies so that we can inform a curriculum adoption process in the 23-24 school year. And that would include forming a team of educators who participate in the work and explore potential outcome measures that would measure mastery in those Wisconsin standards for social studies. So an indicator 1 evidence is the use of the curriculum audit summary and recommendations, which will clearly align to and inform our process of curriculum adoption moving forward. Indicator 2 is the 150 minutes per week of dedicated social studies and science instruction will be included in the teacher academic schedules at the kindergarten to 5th grade level. And our current evidence of instruction minutes, as you can see, is limited for social studies and science instruction. So we need to take a good look at those instructional minutes and figure out how we can continue to serve students in disciplinary literacy, specifically in science and social studies. And then finally, looking ahead to capacity building, we know that we want to select the best comprehensive social studies curriculum, build a program of high achievement for students, looking at an adoption cycle that includes the 23-24 school year, the adoption team, identifying social studies materials from multiple vendors, piloting materials, reviewing and feedback, selection of social studies materials, and implementation of the new social studies curriculum in the 24-25 school year. And by way of reminder for the Board of Education coming out of the Standards Institute, one of the first goals that we will be addressing in June is that development of a model for curriculum adoption and implementation. And that will be aligned to our values, our beliefs, to the standards, to our commitment to serving all learners. And that will be determined in early June so that we can go ahead and provide that implementation in August. And then finally, the capacity building evidence is that design of that implementation model, high quality curriculum resources, and monitoring report students' results for social studies. It's necessary for us to select the best comprehensive social studies curriculum and develop a program that will prepare all of our students to be engaged and informed participants, committed to the ideas and values of our democratic public, able to apply the skills of inquiry, collaboration, decision-making, and problem solving. And I will just say in relation to that, in terms of those goals specifically stated by the Board of Education, the Wisconsin state standards for social studies are aligned to achieving all of those goals. They are well-written standards, and just need to be able to provide the resources that our teachers and students need to meet those standards.
If we just can circle back up to indicator 2, I know Adam, Mr. Dingshine can add some additional supporting evidence, but supporting documentation of our curriculum minutes.
Yeah, you grow the board in specifically at the elementary level where we're learning more broadly different social studies ideas and concepts. The way that we have conceptualized as a district our social studies instruction, and this is an area where we are currently using resources that are a mix of resources from the C3 framework, which is the National Council for the Social Studies, as well as teacher created resources over the last few years that were really grounded in the progression in how to meet standards through the National Council for Social Studies. And I want to read a quick excerpt from this because it aligns directly with the work that we've done as a Roanoke Area School District. Specifically around, and to ground in the C3 framework, it's very similar to the Next Gen Science Standards for science, the C3 framework for social studies. to try to move past what they describe as the marginalization of social studies, to move to a place of application. And while there are still really important concepts in civics, economics, geography, and history we need to learn, the idea of using those concepts to develop questions, to plan inquiry, to be able to informatively gather and evaluate sources, which in our digital age is an ever-growing skill that we need to provide our students with, to be able to use evidence to develop claims, really to build to a place of communicate and critique conclusions and to take informed action. Karen spoke to our responsibility in developing our students to be informed members of our democratic society, and it all stems from those ideas. So what the National Council for Social Studies speaks to are very much aligned with our work. I quote, the introduction of the Common Core provided an opportunity for social studies educators to reframe instruction to promote disciplinary literacy in such a way as to allow social studies to regain a balanced and elevated role in the K-12 curriculum. And the lessons that we're currently using, particularly the ones that I will call attention to Liz Folberg, a teacher at Star Prairie, who's been very much a champion of this work, provides folders that the board can access through the links provided. That has all of the resources, it has videos, it has primary and secondary sources, the lesson plans, all of that for teachers to take and use. Once again, to come back to the idea of developing questions and planning inquiries, learning these concepts and skills and engaging in really critical discussions around the application of those skills, the application of those concepts, and centering social studies language and vocabulary to be able to be used not just during social studies instruction, but in the rest of their work in schools.
So I just really quickly want to really lean into what Adam just stated, and I say that because this is a educational philosophical shift that our community is. We're going to do our very best to help communicate, but it's going to take a broad breadth of communication to make this understanding. While content is important, it's really skills, inquiry, and critical thinking that we're trying to develop in our classrooms with social studies and other content areas as a backdrop. But what we're teaching students how to do are how to ask that next question, how to be more inquiry based, how to critically think about information that is in front of them, because we all know that there's multitude of information. How do you decipher and make meaning of that? And as much as I love the game So Jeopardy, I try to watch it every day. It's not what we are. We're not a Jeopardy contest where if I can Google an answer in 5 seconds, it's the wrong question. And so I would really want the board to understand that this is a true philosophical shift in education that we as former students in a traditional high school setting probably didn't engage in it. So there'll be some questions of why we have moved in this direction, and that is our why. We are trying to build a more inquiry-based and critical thinking a student, knowing that the content is readily available at fingertip. But what do I do with that content if I don't know how to be inquiry-based and think about it, or understand how to think about it critically?
I think that's an important point, and you say this is probably not how we all learned in our education. And we are not living the world that our students are going to be living in. They're going to be living in a world that where critical thinking skills are elevated beyond even we have been able to develop as adults. And if we're teaching the same way that we were taught, we've missed something.
And this values and lifts up the way that teachers are getting educated to become social studies teachers. I'm on an interview team right now to hire a new faculty lead for social studies pre-service education at UW. And this is what philosophy is about how we train new teachers to teach. How does social studies education look? So our district then aligning with new educators coming into the field, that also sounds very exciting, that we won't have that dissonance of new teachers who are motivated by new ways of teaching. We will be a district that will be sought out because we have that same vision of flipping the narrative of what it means to be a learner of social studies.
If I can pile on, I think one of the things I'd like to add on is, while from an organizational standpoint, it's a philosophical shift. I think that, a lot of people that I talk to, this is a shift that people have already made because this is the way our world is. We've fundamentally moved from a world where information was scarce and you had to dig deep into a library or an Encyclopedia Britannica to find it. That's what I was educated in before there was internet, right? We had to be information accumulators. And our kids now, information is free, cheap, and dirty. And they need to be information sorters. They need to be the Google algorithm and not just use the Google. And that's something that people get at a pretty fundamental level. You know, especially when they're watching their kids struggle through the overwhelming nature of information that's shoved through their phone and into their faces on a regular basis. So I love, you know, seeing this philosophical shift. But I think it's something that a lot of people get at a fundamental level. And these, you know, superficial arguments about content do a disservice to what we actually need, which everybody knows. We need critical thinkers. We need, you know, information sorters. And this is awesome. I'm super excited for it.
Well, what we know too is that our teachers are valiantly looking for the resources to do just what we're talking about. And what we want to do is to be able to support them, provide them with those resources so that they can continue to create those opportunities for students to do that critical thinking, that inquiry that we're talking about. I mean, so we've talked before about designing curriculum and teaching are two different roles. And what we want to do is we want to continue to provide all of our teachers in all content areas across all grade levels with the resources that they need to ensure that all students have access to grade level standards every day in every classroom, and that they can go about the business of teaching all learners.
I know, I've heard you talk about this before, I just wanted to confirm or reiterate that. I know we have some amazing social studies educators in our district already. And that this kind of curriculum adoption process does not preclude the creativity or, you know, the things that they bring to the classroom that make them such a great educator. It's not as though they're boxed in by a curriculum adoption process. And I just want to have you confirm that, because I think sometimes parents who are educators maybe don't understand the curriculum adoption process does not mean that, you know, everyone has to teach it this way. It's not like a cookie cutter.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It provides the framework, and so teachers then can bring their own uniqueness, their own flair, their spin, their creativity to the lesson. So it certainly it allows them the time and the freedom to bring what they want to bring to the lesson. So here's the framework, and then they can do anything they want to do in the framework.
Yes, I know my own students remember some educators that had this district that were amazing social studies educators. So I just want to relate here that this kind of thing doesn't clip their wings or in any way say that they have.
We start from the place of having all the confidence in our teachers to know their students. And recognize that in every classroom, there's a different constellation of students, and that changes annually, and sometimes that changes biannually. And knowing your students and having the resources that you need to support them in that learning is what we want to provide. But knowing your students and knowing what you were going to design and develop in terms of lessons for them to access that learning. Again, we have every confidence in the teachers to do that. We just want to continue to give them what they need to.
And to provide a concrete example from, you know, our current curricular resources in the district, the joy that comes with facilitating deep discussion. You know, moving from a place where we're teaching, you know, facts and timelines about French fur traders and First Nations peoples, shifting that to a conversation, and that's one of the lessons that has been created, the communication challenges that came with not French traders not speaking Ojibwe and Ojibwe living in Wisconsin, not speaking French, and how that hindered and aided different things in our Wisconsin history that led to kind of where we're at now in discussion and making some of those connections and living in those key questions. There's tremendous joy, not just engagement from students, but opportunities to support academic vocabulary, support language, and the connections and extensions and supports that can come from that sort of discussion. To Dr. Hawkins' point, that's where the beauty lives in the classroom, the teachers to be able to take that through the facts of it
the things that they do need to teach for the standards, but to allow the students and the teacher to take that discussion or
One clarification on the question. I think I've asked this with any capacity building, but because you started visiting in Karen, the Institute this summer is kind of the space for which the framework for the adoption cycle, right? The structures, who's involved, the scope of that, that's kind of the time and space for that to get put together, which is great. So thank you for looking that up again. The one thing I didn't realize and striking me now with social studies, how does curricular adoption and alignment look for the number of classes at the high school that have been truly sort of developed by individual teachers and are just singleton type elective courses? Could you say more about how, the impact of curricular adoption impacts classes like that are truly the ingenuity of teachers that we have here?
Yeah, the primary focus of the work will be on K-8 social studies in terms of finding the resources that they need, because again, the audit was very clear that that's where we have the largest gaps in terms of resources for teaching and learning. But with that adoption process and with those decisions, our high school teachers will also be represented in that space and in that room, so that we're thinking of that journey of a lifetime through social studies from kindergarten to graduation in the rural area school district. And part of that process will also allow us to identify where there might be some gaps in resources at the high school as well. But what we see for the most part at the high school is what you're describing, a richness and a robust, and obviously we have a number of advanced placement courses which provide through College Board lots of good guidance around resources and materials as well. So we're really lucky in that respect that we're going to look to our high school teams to also help us sort of back map and figure out what are our students with needs. Thank you.
I know we have a lot of board action. Is this a place where we can stop, pull this into board action to dispose, we can collectively take care of this results policy?
We could, you just circle it as the final vote in board action, or else once you start going back and forth.
I know it's in a back and forth. Okay, so are we comfortable holding all of this until the end? Okay. That's good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, team. So next, we're going to transition you to operations expectations and policy number 8. And thank you, Joe. Which is communicating with and support for the Board of Education. I'm going to jump right to the interpretation in this area. Because I find the interpretation in the heart of the voice of the board through interpretations to be sometimes as meaningful as the policy. So in this, the board values having a breadth of facts, knowledge, information, and trend analysis provided by the superintendent on issues related to their job of governing the district, as delineated in their board superintendent relations and operational expectations. And so what I know to be true is that the board has an expectation to be notified in advance whenever possible of any matters relating to board work or anything that the facts and trends, and you've seen multiple examples of that today in our board presentations, both on the academic side and as well as on the operations side. And we pride ourselves in trying to make sure the board is aware of any media attention prior to that coming to that fruition. I did in the executive summary name an incident, an occurrence this year where, and I think I only found one, so if you found others, please let me know. When we had a report that was not front loaded with the Board of Education, and in that situation, and first I want to back up and because I know they're often listening, and I mean this sincerely, I truly appreciate our partnership with the Verona Press. The Verona Press has done a phenomenal job of covering Verona area school district, providing both highlights and just attention to the public around our inner workings. So I'm very grateful for that partnership. We did have one media report that we didn't anticipate being a new story, which was the communications audit. In our minds, we look at communications audit as a work stream, and a normal is it's just really best practice in what you do in the communications department. So we found it was a communications audit that was a immediate report, but that was the one instance where it did not front load a conversation that would be a media story. So otherwise, we felt that we had given the board a significant heads up on anything coming towards the Board of Education. As you can see, OE8 is very lengthy with a total of 22 indicators. We were able to score 21 of those indicators, and the one that was not scored was specifically just based off calendaring. One is that a proficiency score for me on my evaluation on communication strategies, but my evaluation is not due until August. And so that will just have to be held in abeyance until we are able to determine that during my formal evaluation, which will come in August based off the board calendar. So I'm gonna quickly go over each of the 12 sections here, and then ask the board to propose any questions to me. Just name the specific area or indicator, and then I will address that. So again, beginning with 8.1. Excuse me. In this one, the superintendent will submit required monitoring reports, and that is, by policy that, and based off the board calendar, that I submit monitoring reports on the result side and on the operation side. In 8.2. Is the information on transient facts or other information relevant to the board's work. You'll see that in the form of budget updates. You'll see that in the form of our annual report. You see that also in the form of results and data around our students' performance. 8.3, we just had an example of it today, which is the board updated significant transfers of money within the funds are substantially affecting the district. Just maybe less than an hour ago, you saw Chad present that information to you. 8.4, as adequate information from a variety of internal and external viewpoints to assure informed board decisions. We wanted to make sure, I'm gonna dig a little bit more into this one as it's a little bit trickier. And so this is, again, some of the rationale why we have so many advisories that report to myself and to the members of the director team and the central office. And then that informs information that we bring back to the Board of Education. You saw an explicit example of that, a firm example of it among many, but the interim equity statement that the board voted on in December was a direct reflection of internal and external viewpoints that were brought to administration and then to the Board of Education for a direct request for a switch of policy. So when you think about someone, and if I miss a group, I apologize, but if you think about our gender and inclusivity group, our students with IEPs, advisory group, our student advisory, our staff advisory, our parent advisory, just to name a few, those are the viewpoints that we are using to inform leadership moves that then go to the Board of Education to be reflected either in policy or for updates. I also highlighted a portion in there and just remind the board of this is always in their purview if decided to do so. If there is a perspective that you feel like you're missing as part of the interpretation, it does state when the board requests that they can request for me to gather more internal or external viewpoints. And so you always have that right to do so based off policy. I mentioned 8.5, which is informed the board of significant media coverage. With the multitude of coverage, with the exception of the one that they didn't send you a note on, we were able to cover instances of media coverage. Sometimes I'll send something out just in case it becomes media coverage. I also know that depending on the societal news flow, what may come up may not always be important in everyone's eyes at the time. Good. 8.6, so I wanted to lean into this one a little bit more. This one is really where is my responsibility to inform the board or individual members if, in my opinion, the board or as a whole or individual members of the board have encroached in areas of responsibility that were assigned to the superintendent. I will gladly say that during debriefs, I've been able to have conversations when we got into gray areas between board practice and superintendent practice. It is also my responsibility, based off board policy, to report those incidents to our board president through policy and have everything have those issues addressed. And as you can see, as you're members of the board, nothing has risen to an area where it had to be addressed by a full board. So that's as I've spoken a multitude of times, and I will continue to reiterate, we understand that's not always the case. And I really I admire and respect how much the board has really had a lot of intentionality of trying to stay within the confines of the coherent governance model. So both an appreciation and acknowledgement of the steps that we're taking to ensure that happens. I'm just going to frankly just say this: I am never publicly going to call out a board member. It's just not. It's not going to happen. And that's just a respect component of it, and it's also, I just feel like we can have those professional discussions and come to some resolution, not an agreement with some resolution. And I just, from an ethical standpoint and my leadership style, I'm not going to call a board member. I just I don't practice that way. And I hope the board can respect my stance on that. All right. I'm not sure if I'm giving a great example of being simple and concise in the presentation of information, but that is an expectation of our board. Superintendent will treat all members partially, assure all members have equal access to information. They try to do all board leadership letter goes to everyone, and everyone on our board have the sessions with us where we are doing updates. And so that information allows for time for a back and forth dialogue, and there's all 7 board members have that same opportunity, and I reflected that in the calendar where I show everyone's appointments on the calendar. It's my responsibility to inform the board if there's any time that I will be out of compliance, or if we are not making reasonable progress. Those are always going to be reflected in the monitoring report and in the executive summary. Those will be stated whether we are not making timely progress as an organization, or if there is a significant issue that arises and we are in place with our policy, I will name that and call it out. I think one of the things I publicly stated is that I feel like we missed a vote on one of our instructional practices, and it just publicly stated that we were in that area of not being directly in compliance. So at that time would have been OE 11, but making the necessary adjustments. All right, bear with me with a few more. I said just say 9 or 10.
Or 10.
The 8.10 is be able to provide adequate information about all administrative action decisions that are delegated to the superintendent by law are required for the board to approve. You'll always see those in the board action part of the agenda. You actually see an example of that today with our first board action agenda item. 11, in a timely manner, disposition of complaints referred to the superintendent by the Board of Education. And I again appreciate the board when something comes to you, you send it to me, and what I've heard as feedback from our Board of Education is that there are not significant gaps in time, or there's a responsiveness from either myself or a member of the team to parents if the complaint comes through the board and then to me. All right, and then finally, the superintendent will inform the board in advance of any deletions or additions to significant modifications to district policies. or instructional programs. You just saw a presentation that reflects some of that work. We're looking at curriculum adjustments for first it was science, and now you're also hearing the same thing for social studies, and also philosophical shifts. But I just stressed with our last results policy, we make the board aware that those philosophical shifts are coming into fruition. So I know this is a short snapshot of a very deep OE, but I just felt like it was an opportunity to ask questions if there were individual indicators or any of the evidence that you saw within those indicators. I'll be happy to address those instead of going deep into each one of them. So I'll open to the board.
We want to go in, is there anything starting? 8.1?
We just let anyone share.
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
jump
so
in.
Whatever is
Yeah,
identified which OE it is.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say, I appreciate that you pointed out, and I think it was 8.4, and that's where superintendent will assure that the board has adequate information from a variety of internal and external viewpoints. And I think this is one where, as we've gone through it, just in conversations that we've had, I think that that's been one that's kind of evolved as the board has made additional requests, and I think that's something that I appreciate that these indicators and these are able to grow as we experience them, and maybe we find we need different information, that there's always a open door to ask for that additional input. I think one of the things we talked about is this input that is provided to you and then to the board, and in some cases that's exactly what we need, and sometimes we're looking to have input directly to the board facilitated by you. And I think if we're kind of in a growth space there, but I appreciate that is something that you're welcome the dialogue about.
Thank you.
It's a very quiet word. Yours.
I mean, I just found this OE, reading it now from an analysis standpoint, right,
Yeah.
not an interpretation standpoint at the onset. I mean, so much of this, we are continually entrenched in these in a very different way than some of the other OEs, where we are truly getting updates that we are not in the day-to-day grind of what's happening in those. But these are our board meetings, these are our bi-weekly meetings or our weekly meetings, and so it was really different to read this and to feel like it was almost a set of reminders versus a collection of evidence for which I had not seen any of it before. So yeah, I think the framing of it just makes for a different scope of maybe my lack of questions, because I just feel like you're mirroring back the experience that I would agree what you are interpreting is what I've experienced. It seems to be in alignment because we've been partnering really closely, I think, on this goal in general.
And I understand that the debriefs are significant time on you as board members, with your jobs, but it really allows for, and sometimes we can go 45 minutes, sometimes we can go 5 minutes, and that's okay, but it really allows for that, just a quick check-in. It gives me a pulse of the community, but also if there's something that I want to make sure that there's an awareness of, it's not always perfect, but try to agree not to get caught off guard. It's the biggest thing, is don't let them get caught off guard.
Okay, the lack of comments are probably a good indicator where the board is.
So with that, I will close the superintendent's report and turn it over to our board president for action.
Okay. We have quite a number of things to on board action. I think going to start maybe backwards and kind of work our way up, since we just finished with OE 8, since the board is going to look at that. Is there a motion to approve the OEs as presented, so then we can bring it into board discussion? So moved. There's a motion from Jen. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second from John.
Going backwards.
I am.
Let's get on the way.
Just when you have a good slideshow, a good row arrangement.
We're good.
Yeah. Okay, motion from John, second from John. Is there any board discussion on OE8?
I just had one suggestion, so it's under the 8.4 interpretation. The word subgroup appears there, and I know we've been cautioned and told that not and now
On the
we're
page.
lucky enough to see it pop on the page at least, so they want to.
Oh, yeah.
Like just make an edit and make it focus group.
Right, yeah.
So I will need, since it's an interpretation, I need the board's permission to change it.
Well, that would just be a word change to
Yeah.
focus group, so that would be within your discretion to do. Yeah. Good catch, yeah.
Very good. Where's Lori? There you go. 8.4 interpretation, please.
Last line.
It's
So we just read the input will come from stakeholders and represent the views of, or from focus groups as appropriate or something along.
It's page 7 of the text.
so the second paragraph of the interpretation, there's the last word.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
Good catch. Anything else from the board as far as?
Just a heads up, we haven't found the perfect replacement word yet. We're trying to stop saying stakeholders too. There's some negative connotation there as well.
But we don't know what's in any one in place.
Yeah, we've tried a bunch of them and they don't flow very well, but we'll,
Sometimes constituents work.
Yeah.
Sometimes not.
yeah.
Community members. Okay.
Yeah, so just an awareness, when we find the right word, we'll bring it to the board for.
Yeah. Good. Okay, hearing no questions from the board, Corby, I want to make sure we're checking in with you, just so I know are we good? Okay. It's over there. Hearing no questions from the board, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving OE8 as presented, signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? OE8 has been approved as presented. Thank you, everybody. If we're working our way backwards, so for the slideshow.
We're trying to make our executive summaries for next year easier. Yeah, it's always hard for us to find the video. Lori, so we're at 2 hours into, just put us at 2 hours into this meeting on this date for next year's executive summary.
It'll be easier than watching the whole thing again in a year. Yes, over and over again, repeated board watching sounds like a bit of a nightmare, so. Okay, so let's take a look at results policy R 2.1.4. Is there a motion to approve this results policy as presented? There's a motion from John. There is a second from Corby. Are there any questions about the results policy? I know we've had a lot of great discussion about capacity building throughout, so I feel like we are well situated and educated in this process. So hearing that, no questions, all in favor of approving our 2.1.4 signify with aye. 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 Any opposed? Our 2.1.4 has been approved as presented.
May I provide some context to G, please?
Yes.
So in item G, we're asking the board to adjust the monitoring reports for OE12 to moving from May 1st to May 15th. The rationale, we have a key staff member that will be part of the presentation that it will be out of the district on May 1st, and we really would like that staff member to be here with us to present.
Sounds good. Is there anyone willing to make a motion to approve that change? Motion from John. Is there a second? Second from Joe. All in favor of moving OE12 to May 15th, signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. The change has been approved. Okay, now I'm working my way backwards here. Okay, annual budget hearing and meeting date proposal. We have a proposal to move schedule the annual meeting for September 25th, 2023. Is there a motion to
Sorry.
No.
That's so fast. On the beach on this time.
Got a motion from Joe, and there's a second from John. All in favor of approving the annual meeting date on September 25th, 2023, signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, the meeting date has been set for the 25th. Thank
Lori,
you.
how's the pace for you?
It's
Okay,
zippy.
and you're saying Corby is doing hand raise, so he's been voting and everything. Okay. It's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, really. Okay, we have our OE7 asset protection indicator revision as presented earlier. Anyone need to have a reminder of the modification or we,
Just want to confirm that's a modification of an indicator, not a modification of the OE language.
let me,
And it says indicator 7.4.3 would read differently. So I think.
hang on, I'm gonna go back to,
Change the legend.
And it was the indicator that had that language.
Yeah.
On track.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
It was an indicator, not the policy, or else we would need two readings for that.
so it's specifically indicator 7.4, indicator 3.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to approve the change to the recommended language? Motion from John, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Jen, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. The indicator language has been changed as presented earlier. Okay. Budget amendment, is there a motion to approve the 2022-23 budget amendment as presented earlier? This is regarding the Ice Inc. Shipping funds.
So moved.
Motion from John, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Joe. All in favor, sorry, Courtney, that was close. That was. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? The budget amendment as presented has been approved. The next we have the state budget, Board of Education resolution. We need probably a little bit of background on this. Joe, do you want to read the, first of all, has everyone had a chance to look at the budget resolution? Joe, would you be willing to read this? We can make a specific motion and vote on the language as presented.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. As treasurer, would you please?
Whereas the school board, as representatives of teachers, staff, parents, and community members of the Verona Area School District are united in our effort to provide all children the highest quality educational opportunities possible. And whereas in the absence of additional revenue limit authority, districts across Wisconsin have been forced to use federal COVID-19 funds to cover budget gaps the state failed to address in the current biennium budget. And whereas the federal COVID-19 funds were created to address the additional stressors brought on by the pandemic and were never intended to supplant state and local funding. And whereas inflationary costs have impacted all areas of school funding from utilities to staff compensation. And whereas attempts from the state to provide school districts with additional funds through increasing general aid without increasing the revenue limit resulted in districts receiving no additional spendable dollars in the current state biennium budget. And whereas the majority of school districts are facing financial crises which could be solved by legislative action. And whereas the decision not to properly fund school will ultimately impact the educational quality of our state's children. Therefore, be it resolved that the Verona Area School District joins with other school districts of Wisconsin and in partnership with Dane County Superintendents and Boards of Education in calling on the Committee of Joint Finance to support the following investments in public education. Revenue limits increase to at least $1,000 over the 2 years of the biennial budget. The mandated services for serving our students with disabilities increase and be reimbursed by at least 60%. Fund services through widely accessible and non-competitive means to serve the diverse needs of our school districts, including mental health support, school nutrition, bilingual support, services for students living in poverty, and rural students, including low revenue limit districts.
Thanks so much, Joe, for reading that. I move that we approve the resolution in support of of investing in our public schools. There's a second from Christina. All in favor of approving the resolution as presented? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? The resolution has been unanimously adopted. Thank you very much. Okay, is there a motion to approve the 2020? There's also on the first page, if everyone could take a look at the first page of the resolution. I would like to make a motion that the board join in adding our signatures to this letter to leadership, state leadership, and in partnership with our area school districts. There a motion, I've made the motion. Is there a second? A second from Christina.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do we anticipate more boards signing this?
Yes, we're waiting, yes, as we are doing today, we're waiting for superintendents to meet with their board of boards.
So you did an extra for all of
Yes.
that, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely.
First Monday of the month.
Yeah,
so we'll have
yeah,
lots
I
of-
figured that was
lots
true,
of
but
votes. Yes, there was a motion from me and second from Christina. All in favor of joining in signing this letter, signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you so much. That has been approved. Thank you. Next we have, is there a motion to approve the 2023-24 health insurance benefits package as presented earlier? Motion from Jen. Is there a second? Second from John? All of it, gosh, Corby, I gotta keep my eye on you because I keep missing it. Okay, all in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The health insurance benefits package as presented has been approved. Thank you. And then we need a motion to approve the intergovernmental cooperative agreement with MMSD regarding 4K programs under Wisconsin statute 66.0301. And I'm not sure, could you give it just a quick, this is one of the cooperative agreements that we annually enter into, and so it's more of a pro forma vote.
Right, by statute, the board must agree to any multi-municipality agreements between various districts. So as it's been spoke to in 8.8 and OE8, it is my responsibility to inform you of any partnerships that require board approval
And this has been a long-standing.
for years.
Yeah.
maybe decades. Yeah.
Is there a motion? Corby, I'm watching you. There's a motion from Corby. There's a second from Christina. All in favor of approving the intergovernmental cooperative agreement with Women Steve regarding 4K signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? That has been approved. Okay. We have zipped through some significant board action at that point. That leaves us with general board updates. I do want to take a second and want to point out Corby did a fantastic job of emceeing the African American Academic Championship. Oh, I never, the long title, I never get the quite right. Did an amazing job, and our students did an amazing job competing. So the regional competition is Wednesday, and so I'm Jen, thank you for coming to cheer the kids on. I think as Dr. Rose pointed out, it's pretty exciting when you have an audience for our students and it doesn't involve a ball. I mean,
Yeah.
it's good competition and our students did a really excellent job. So Corby, thank you for representing the school board and on behalf of the kids, most importantly. So are there any other general board updates?
Did I see on our calendar there's another, there's like 11 things for them, or is that?
The regional.
Yeah.
Oh, is that the next step?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Runner High School is the host for it.
Oh,
And our teams will be competing as well. So the high school, one of the high school teams that made it through the local competition, as well as Savannah Oaks will represent our middle schools against the other Dane County schools.
We have a pan bus. I line it up today.
Absolutely.
So how many other, Corby, go ahead.
I just want to thank you for being one of the judges and thank you to everybody from the board for showing up. It was a great event. I think the students loved it. I know we loved it.
Yeah.
And we learned some things in the process.
Absolutely.
True, very true.
So to answer your question, Christina, it is the Middleton Cross Plains, Sun Prairie Area School District, Rowan Area School District, and all four of the Madison Metropolitan. All five, all five, no?
Yes.
4 or 5,
Fine.
4 of the 5 Madison Metropolitan School District, and I don't know who their middle school rep will be.
Corby, will you be emceeing again?
I will not because we want it to be fair. We want more members of the 100 to get their opportunity.
Well, you did an amazing job. So,
Thank you.
okay, any other board updates?
Nicole and I participated in the Latinx Leadership Summit last week and participated in a workshop with some other elected officials. And it was just a good opportunity to engage with students and talk to them about their future plans and, you know, help them see a little bit of what we do. There were representatives from Fitchburg and Verona City Council and from the Dane County Board, and then Nicole and I there as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for doing that.
It was a good event.
Yeah, all right. Anything else? Okay, moving on to superintendent's consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to make sure? No, I'm not. I'm not certain about that at all.
Okay.
Is there, it seems to be,
Right, and lots of learning.
yeah. No public comment? Okay. Any public comment from our esteemed administrators? Moving on to superintendent consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to take a look? Any questions? Hearing none, superintendent's consent agenda has been approved as presented. The end of board consent agenda. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at that, including the meeting minutes? Any questions or corrections? Hearing none, board consent agenda has been approved as presented. We are getting quite a list of future agenda items. Again, tomorrow's election, a big one for us. We also have our next regular board meeting on the 17th, and then again, May 1st. Senior Night Awards coming up on May 8th. That's another great event for board members if they want to come and see some of our students and their remarkable achievements academically. And then also keep in mind, we have graduation is coming up on June 10th. So quite a few of our future agenda. Okay, with that, if there is nothing else, we are going to adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin statute 19.85 sub 1 sub F to consider financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations regarding pupil expulsion hearings. Is there a motion to adjourn to closed session? I have a motion from Joe. Is there a second? Second from Corby. I saw it. Okay. We'll take a roll call vote, starting with Joe.
Aye.
Jen? Aye. Christina? Aye. John? Aye. Corby? Aye as well. I